This is the third day of the August 89 7-day retreat at Springwater. Maybe as the first thing we'll talk about how does one deal with pain in sitting? If one hasn't done any extended sitting like this, and extended is already 32 minutes of sitting. For some people, it's a long time. One may have never sat that long, and then maybe 3 times in a row, and then all day long, and for days. One has not expected it to be painful the way it may be. And the question then comes up, how do I deal with this pain? Let me first say emphatically that pain is not recommended as an aid to whatever. That it's good to have pain because then one has something to concentrate upon or go deeper. Would be very nice if one could sit down and not have pain. Because then the energies are freed to list. Pain draws onto itself energy in one way or another. And the rounds are not the length that they are in order to produce some pain toward the end. I would love to have 25-minute rounds for people here, but I've been voted down every time on it for years. When I go away and there's no voting on it, we have 25-minute rounds of sitting. So that new people who come have a minimum of pain and discomfort in sitting. But then there are many people who, not in order to have pain, ask for the 32-minute rounds, but they find that this is a good length of sitting. 25 minutes, people say, feels like up and down all the time. So it's not, there's no intentional. There's no intention to produce pain by through the rounds of sitting. So the more comfortable you can make yourself at the outset, the better. But it's not possible for most of us to sit for 32 minutes without something beginning to ache, at least at some times, maybe all the time. And this is why it is entirely optional to sit the next round. One has sat through a round which was very painful. One does not have to sit the next round. Although sometimes one forgets that one had pain because in walking it's not there. In walking the body changes, moves, relaxes maybe. And the pain in the shoulder or back, knee or whatever isn't noticed, so before one knows it, one has sat down again, and here it starts, the round has started. So remember, if you don't want to sit the next round, you don't have to, or you can sit in the dining room where there is more flexibility to move around. from one posture to another. Take a walk or lie down on your mattress. But no matter how well we calculate it, even in 25-minute rounds, maybe in 10 or 5 minutes of sitting, there may be pain. So here it is, and one has agreed not to get up and leave the room, but to remain quiet with whatever is going on. How does one deal with the pain in the shoulders, the tenseness and tightness in the neck, or upper back, lower back, hips, knees, legs, ankles, head, or a pain in the heart? One doesn't quite know where it comes from, but it's there. Maybe the way one puts the question is already off the mark. How do I deal with it? This is how we've been brought up. We've been reared in dealing with things. Something hurts, do something about it. Take a remedy or do this or that. We've been raised with anxious looks of concerned parents around us, focusing on us when we have pain. Because if a parent is anxious, then we are also anxious about our pain. It's something that shouldn't be. Something that should be gotten rid of. Or something that should be fought with by gritting one's teeth. People tell me that sometimes they become aware of gritting their teeth. So if we don't put it that way, then what is pain? What is going on that gives rise to this expression, I have pain? And not only gives rise to the expression, I have pain, but what should I do about it? I don't like it. I want to get rid of it. I must overcome it. How long will it last? Will it be there forever? Will it get worse? What gives rise to this? Within our body. Can one wonder and feel, get in touch with it, contact whatever gives rise to all of these thoughts? And maybe become aware that all these thoughts that arise from whatever gives discomfort in the body also retroactively gives discomfort. Not liking the pain gives discomfort, generates discomfort in the body. All conflict with what is generates discomfort. All conflicting or adversary, hostile, or fighting kind of thought manifests physically. And this compounded pain gives rise to new thoughts about itself, how to get rid of it. It's an augmenting cycle. Can one become aware of that? See that for oneself. Experiment with it. And experiment with silently being in the presence of what's there, without comment about it, without even the word pain. Is that possible? It has come up, it floats around there, but can one listen, not paying attention to the word, but to where the word arises from? No, not where the word arises from. It arises from memory. But what gives rise to it, the stimulus, whatever's happening in the body, what is happening? How quietly can one listen? Quietly meaning without reaction, for or against it. Without knowing it from the past. We do know pain from the past. And that knowledge of pain in the past in itself can arouse pain. Memory of a painful incident can arouse pain. Memory of a pleasurable incident arouses pleasure. Memory of a fearful incident arouses fear. So what is this thing here? In and of itself. And how is it augmented? And how is this augmentation dissolved? By just listening to what is, without knowing it, without having any plan of action, truly not knowing what to do, and not intending to do something. Just what is it? And quietly listening, feeling, sensing. Not even localizing, it's my right knee or my left shoulder. Not knowing the direction. If we don't say these words, then the mind is in a different state. Not zeroing in on this feeling of pain, but allowing it to be there as spaciously as it will in the midst of everything else that's going on. The listening is not focused on the pain. It's not focused, it's open. And there are all the sounds of the room, the woods, the meadow. The traffic. Someone breathing, someone moving. All of that has all the space it needs in a universe that is vast with space and vast with silence. The silence of no comment. Just what is everything? But it doesn't have to be a question that is repeated. It may not need to be verbalized, although it may form itself. But the whole state of being is what is it? Meaning, I don't know. The words that come are words that come from memory. That's just one of the minute occurrences in this whole vast universe, this moment. if we don't say to ourselves, I have this pain or I'm suffering this ache, if we don't put it that way, maybe we're beginning to wonder whether there is someone who is suffering it or whether there's just what is. And as we say, I'm suffering this, and why should I have to suffer this? Then we can see the pain become complex, more complex. The sensations are there, they're undeniably there. But our way of putting it, I am suffering that, creates a duality between the sufferer and what he or she suffers. And that may be thought created. In truth, there may be just what's going on right now. And then the thought, I'm suffering it, creating the feeling that there is someone separate from the pain. And we're questioning that thoroughly, all the way. Whether there is in fact a split, or whether thought creates this split between the sufferer and his or her suffering. Maybe becoming aware of the tremendous conflict and pain generated by this split. Of poor me. What I have to endure, what I have endured, and what I may have to endure in the future. Can one begin to appreciate the immense power of thought and language and memory and projection into past and future? Of what starts with a simple, relatively simple sensation. Because on the physiological, anatomical, or atomic level, it's not simple what constitutes pain, but we're not into that, into analyzing that. So beware of one's past experiences supplying comments about this pain. It's going to get worse. I know it from the past. I know how it is. It's been like this every time. Put it aside when this comes up. See it and put it aside easily. Easily meaning the important thing is to find out what this back pain is, if I don't call it that, if I don't know it from the past. Feel it for the first time without a split. No me there suffering, but all ears and senses, all senses. Senses operating as one whole perception. Which leaves no room for an I. I mean the capital I. Someone asked, actually 2 people, or 3, came up several times. Yesterday, today. You say there's no practice here, and you don't give out a practice, but isn't listening the practice? Isn't listening and looking your practice? Why does one want to insist that there be a practice? One can ask that at the very beginning of such a question. Not immediately answer the question, but wonder where does this desire to establish some kind of a practice come from? Or does one feel that Toni is not consistent? She contradicts herself. She doesn't see that what she's promoting here is a practice. Maybe this is where the question comes from. And then we can look at that. Is one denying A and establishing B as the same thing? And I do look at those things when people bring them up. Are we, in fact, establishing unawares a practice of listening? But we haven't looked at the prior question yet. Why is one, if one is really into having a practice, why? What motivates one? Is this, again, this lostness looking for something to hold on to? Even be able to say to oneself, I do have a practice. To feel a bit more secure, a bit less lost. The power of putting things to ourselves in consistent phrases, consistent with our needs. And we're free to look whether this is so or not. Or is there resistance to look? Is it that we always have to have something that we can visualize or label, know, talk about, put into practice? And what is it about the word itself? What does the word practice imply? Practice usually means doing something over and over and over and over so that one becomes better at it, so that one makes progress, improves, reaches a goal maybe of near perfection. That's possible with a lot of practices. Playing tennis or practicing piano, the fingers become more nimble. And as far as sitting is concerned, the body may become more nimble. May, not for everyone, may become stiffer and sorer. I know people who practice sitting so strenuously, so ambitiously that they had to have knee surgery. It hurt their cartilage. So it does not necessarily mean that practicing always one gets better at it. So can one question this whole thing of wanting to make progress, wanting to get better at something, which is such a deeply entrenched program in human beings, particularly in our Western civilization, progress writ large. So from that point of view alone of making progress, getting better and better at it, I don't know whether listening and looking fits that at all. Because either there is listening or there is not. When there is listening, there's listening. And when there's inattention and there's no listening. And how could one practice listening? You could say, well, by listening. Well, but why call listening a practice? It's something that happens very naturally when we're interested in something, when we want to find out. When there's a strange noise in the woods, we want to find out what it is, and we stop. We don't make extra noise by shuffling our feet. We may stop talking to our friend and even stop all motion to listen to the wind in the trees. And to the extent that there is minimal labeling, minimal reaction, minimal self-concern, the listening is clear. Is clearer the less self-concern. So can one practice to be less self-concerned? Or is the concern to become less concerned about oneself itself self-concern? Was that too complicated? To be concerned to get better at listening is self-concern, which prevents listening, which takes the energy onto itself. I must be, I should be, I want to become better. That all is bound energy, tied up energy, which is not there for the openness of listening. Without concern whether I'm good at it or not as good as my neighbor, who seems to sit there so quietly. He must be listening very well. With that thought, all kind of manner of stuff springs up, doesn't it? Which is energy locked up in some kind of a narrow chamber, bouncing around. Comparison, competitiveness, which comes with practice. Who is better at it? Who has made more progress? We're conditioned that way. It's inevitable that comparisons arise, and the ambition to become as good as the other, or to become the best, to outdo everyone. Actually, sometimes spiritual training centers hook into this competitive programming that we all have. Thinking that this will, I don't know what is thought about that. So can one leave the beauty of listening and looking untouched by the idea of practice, with all of its concomitants, all its traditional orchestration? Just allow it to happen when it does. one wakes up from a dream or from having thought randomly, fantasized, imagined things, suddenly, for whatever reason that we don't know, I don't know, one comes to, as it were, there's a moment of realizing that one has been dreaming, fantasizing, thinking. At that moment, can there just be simple listening to what else is going on beside the dream with all that it has aroused physically? Listen to everything audible, including the silence in which it's all happening. The silence of no interference. Just listening. Not listening as, oh, I forgot my practice, I should now practice listening. Then one is still thinking. Just stopping and wondering with open senses, vulnerably open senses, unprotected, unguarded. Unguarded, I mean, not afraid to look what's there. Not afraid to feel the pain. Not afraid to see all that competitiveness brings in its wake, or jealousy, the pain of it, the emotion of it, the rage of it. People say, well, how do you do it? But that's looking for a practice again, isn't it? And the looking for a practice is not the instant listening to what's there, whether one knows how to do it or not. If one wants to be in touch with it, find out, then one will be in touch. Maybe in touch with dullness, in touch with a feeling of numbness, in touch with not hearing. One person said to me, when I try to hear, I know I can't hear. But how do you know you can't hear? There must be something going on. Can one listen to whatever's going on? When I stuff the earplugs into my ears at night, I have some undisturbed sleep in case there's a thunderstorm or something. I hear it anyways. But as one stuffs the earplugs in, all of a sudden, certain noises, certain frequencies they just stop. It's always amazing. It's like somebody turns off something when these little things expand. But it doesn't mean that the listening stops. Someone said, how do you see? Can you say some more what you mean by looking? By looking. And before if I remember it correctly, before I got very far and getting into some kind of explanation, the person said, I think you're talking very idealistically, very naively, about something that's not possible. Seeing somebody without an image, someone who has hurt you deeply, maybe many times. How can you possibly see that person without the image, without the memory? So, in talking about looking without image, are we setting up an ideal state? Are we talking naively, idealistically, positing a goal of the image-free seeing? Does one perceive it that way? Because that's not what the intention is. There's no intention to do that. It's very dangerous to posit ideal states, because then we don't look at what bothers us, what encumbers us, what blocks and pains us. And the escape is to dream and think about the ideal state that I may eventually reach if I come to enough retreats or whatever. When I talk about looking, I look. When I talk right now about looking, I'm not thinking of an ideal state that I experienced a year ago or 10 years ago. I'm looking. And out of that, I talk. It may sound naive or idealistic to someone. Can one, even though it sounds this way, suspend the judgment? Not believe what is being said, and not dismiss it. Neither. Just listen. So how do we look at a flower? Because the flower right now we have to imagine. So what do we see in front of us? A mat or the floor? Can we look at it? Mat, floor, or two knees there, whatever's there. How do we look at it? Because my talking is using words. But the word floor, or knees, or mat is not what's there. What's there is not a word. So what is it? We have to look. Even though the word seems to come simultaneous, some people say the word is just right there. But can one see, understand, get a hold of the fact that the word is not this thing here? What is this thing? When I use no words and don't escape into describing it through words, then what is it? I have to look. Words do all kinds of things. If I say it's a floor, it's a wooden floor, then I don't look. Then I stay satisfied with my knowledge of a wooden floor. But if I put aside the word wooden floor and look at this thing, I may see something I've never seen before. Because I always thought about it. This is how we negotiate living, by thinking about most of the things. And words help us to negotiate, but they don't help us to see. So, particularly in a quiet retreat where we use very few words, we talk very little, and there is that energy available from not talking, which usually goes into talking. Can one take time to look at the bowl of cereal? The lumps, the milk in between, or the yogurt, the yellow yeast on top. The spoon digging in, maybe a drip from the spoon, white or gray, maybe a mixture. Can one look? Can one taste without knowing it's yogurt with milk or yogurt with oatmeal? Not know what it is one is eating and therefore tasting it. Not know what the process of eating and swallowing is, but wondering about it and going through it with an open body, mind. And noticing all one's habits of wanting to shovel up the next spoonful before one has swallowed the last. Becoming aware of all what's going on. Maybe the thought of more, or the eyes needing to look at something other than what's going on. I mean, in imagination. Is there more outside? Will there be more blueberries? Whether it's possible to see another person who has hurt one many times, deeply, without that memory. Leave it open. Leave it open whether it's possible or not. But don't say it isn't. Don't say it's fantasy. Have no conclusions about it. Because the mind can change. The mind can change from being anchored and stuck and invested in memory to being open to look what's happening now. This change of mind can happen. That the memory loses its impact, loses its importance. The memory of what somebody did to me. And with that, the urge to get even for it, because that keeps the memory alive. And the memory keeps the urge to get even alive, keep each other alive. And therefore, how can one look? One needs to see the person the way she was in order to deal back. But when the mind opens up to other things than memory, the ratio of importance changes. Memory may be there, it isn't wiped out, it isn't taken out. But it's not important. When it is important, it functions beautifully, maybe clearer than if one is loaded with all the unimportant memory. And also to the extent that one becomes more familiar with oneself, more observant how one talks to other people. One person told me, for the first time I heard myself growl at my kids. I'd never really heard it before. I didn't think I was doing it. I didn't hear it like that. So to the extent that we hear ourselves talk to others, we think we're nice, but we may not sound nice at all. We can understand more and more about the mechanism of hurt. We begin thinking only we have been hurt. But we also hurt others in not hearing how we talk, how we look, with threatening eyes or certain expression of the mouth or facial contortions. So to the extent that we're more and more intimate with ourselves, what goes on, to the extent we understand better and better the ones who've hurt us. Not that we necessarily want to be with them. None of this needs to be forced. It comes on its own with interest, with concern, with care about how we live from moment to moment. And then the energy of looking and listening and attending now does not slip into activating all the useless past memories. We will end here for today.